Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch and Learn number 6. I can't believe we're number 6. It's been an interesting year, and definitely a positive of COVID has been able to do these sessions. And a massive welcome back to those who have attended before, and then a huge welcome to any newbies. Welcome. So many of you might have been expecting not to see me hosting today, but seeing Savan, who's our CEO and founder. Unfortunately, her mum's not well, so I am stepping in as the host. I'm a willing host and an enthusiastic host, if nothing else. So yeah, we're really excited today to talk about diversity and inclusion and elaborate on the research we've done recently. So we kicked off some research at the start of the year and obviously produced the report that we launched last month. So hopefully you guys have all seen that and it's been of use. So we're going to go through elements of that today. And to discuss and debate the issues of the day, we've got a brilliant team of panelists lined up to today for the webinar. So we've got Jane Welsh, who is the founder and director of the Diversity Project, amongst many other things, according to her LinkedIn profile. It's very long. And we've then got Jasmine Adams, who is a fellow Jossie, who's been with us over 4 years and is the managing consultant. And we've got the ever-present Greg Jones, who I think, Greg, you've been on all 5 of the previous Lunch and Learns, if I'm not mistaken. And Greg is a partner at Green & Green Solicitors. So welcome, guys.
Afternoon.
Thanks. Hi.
Yeah,
Hi.
I'll let you do your own, proper introductions in a minute, because I'm sure I haven't done you justice. But yes, with all these sessions, they're intended to be interactive, as interactive as possible. So please use the chat. Katie's behind the scenes sort of managing that. So use the chat for any opinions, thoughts, sharing any links, content. For any questions, please put them in the Q&A section below on the Q&A button. And I think we've already had quite a few questions come in prior to the webinar, so that's really positive. So before we kind of start, I think it's important to set the scene. So 2020 was, a massively significant year, not just because of the impact of COVID, but also the death of George Floyd in May. I think we all agree it was a seismic shift in terms of systemic or understanding of systemic racism globally. And it really highlighted racial inequality. But as we all know, and part of what this is diversity comes in so many different forms. And whilst diversity has been on people's and companies' agendas for a long time, I think the impact of that atrocity really made us all collectively look in the mirror and challenge many of our kind of beliefs, often unconscious beliefs and thoughts. And I guess for me personally, I went through that journey and really sought to educate myself and challenge my personal beliefs, the conditioning, the bias, the unconscious bias, and the recognition of I have privilege being a white middle-class male, and I've certainly over the last year come to really appreciate that and recognize that. And I think as a business, we also needed to do that. We don't, I think we're fairly open with the fact that we haven't done enough as a business, as Just Search, in terms of promoting diversity within our business. And it's something that we wanted to do for ourselves. Many, if not all of the Jossies are passionate about diversity and working in a diverse team. But we knew we had to sort of get our house in order first, particularly before we're speaking to clients and candidates about the topic. So I'm really proud of what we've done over the last few months in terms of setting ourselves some commitments, having a plan. We're not experts. We don't pretend to be experts. We're just passionate about it and want to do the right thing because we believe it's important. And so Katie will probably share it, but we set ourselves a D&I charter and a simple set of commitments that we could commit to and deliver on. So I guess that's the sort of catalyst for the report and for today. And hence why we're here. So before we go on, I'd like the panel to introduce themselves. So Jane, why don't you give us a quick introduction about you and your background?
So thank you for that. So Jane Welsh, I was for many, many years an investment consultant with Willis Towers Watson and got interested in diversity and inclusion, both kind of looking at my clients because they were typically boards of trustees, and typically older white men. I saw a lack of diversity in the asset management firms and private equity firms as well that I researched. And I saw a lack of diversity in my own organisation. I ended up chairing the Inclusion and Diversity Council at Willis Towers Watson before I left. But 5 years ago, I co-founded the Diversity Project, which is an initiative to create a more inclusive culture in the investment and savings industry. And we now have 70 firms involved across asset managers, investment consultants, and indeed asset owners. And really, it's all about sharing best practice, developing best practice, and coming up with initiatives that will make a difference. So
Great.
That's where I'm at.
Thanks, Jane. Jazz, tell us about you.
So I'm Jasmine Adams, or Jazz, to most people know me as, and I've been at Job Search for 4 years. So I'm a managing consultant, and then I'm kind of here with two hats. So as Ben said, we had a look at diversity at Job Search. So I volunteered to be one of our JOSI champions for diversity. And the other hat that I wear is that I am pretty diverse myself. So I am mixed race. So my mum is white, my dad is black. I was actually raised in a very, very working class family. We were actually under the poverty line, raised by a single parent, and I am a woman. So I feel like whilst I'm not an expert, I kind of straddle a few diverse areas there. Thanks,
Jazz. Greg.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you for having me back. So some of you will already know me, and hopefully there's a number of clients, etc., have logged on. But if you don't, I'm a partner in the employment team at Green and Green. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I specialise in bringing and defending employment tribunal claims, and quite often they'll relate to discrimination on whatever the protected characteristic might be in relation to that claim. So I've got a real insight in terms of how these things can go wrong. And they often do, but I don't think it should be feared. I don't think that should be a barrier to clients embracing these initiatives. And I work with a lot of private and publicly listed clients on putting together diversity and inclusion strategies, policies, procedures, training sessions. And like Ben, I'm very aware that we are the elephants in the room, in the sense that we are the men, the white, probably now middle class, like you, Jazz, didn't have the easiest of upbringings, and that brings with it the right sort of the white privilege that gets talked about. And we were just having a quick conversation before coming on, and how there could be negative connotations with that. And as a white male, that could get my back up, because I have worked hard. We were talking about having 3 young children and struggling and all of the work that we've had to put in. But what it means, though, is that my sex or my skin color or my physical or mental capabilities have not been the cause of that hardship. And I think that's really, really important. And I was lucky enough to grow up in an environment where diversity was actively encouraged. And I see my role as a solicitor and advising on the Equality Act and equality and inclusion to really help clients champion these sorts of issues. So really, really pleased to be involved. And the fact that we're having this debate, I think, is brilliant.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And thanks, guys. That's a really, really good introduction. So just before we start, so we'd like to just quickly gauge where the audience currently are with their D&I strategies. So we're going to run a quick poll. I think Katie's going to launch that poll, hopefully. Cool. So how is your company's D&I strategy progressing? Either very well, but needs more work. You're at the early stages. You don't yet have a D&I strategy yet. So we'll give it 20, 30 seconds. If you want to start now, that'd be great. Oh, the suspense.
I know we need some music or something for these.
I can't see when you're an attendee. You can see all the the actual votes coming in. Oh, I think we're ready. Katie, do you want to share? Okay, great. So that's really interesting. So 11%, the strategies are going very well. 17% well, but needs more work. The vast majority, the significant majority of people are at the early stages, which is great, because I think this is, again, as a business, we're at that stage, very much so. And I think, some of the things we've done will really help and help those guys. And we don't have a strategy yet. So again, I think we can help with them at all levels, because I think we've got, expertise, especially on Jane's side. So that's really good. So I will close that now, and we'll get going. So I think the first place I'd like to start is where we started with the report, which is something I was really interested in, was the kind of business case for D&I. So I think, I think whether it's right or wrong, I think particularly in an industry like private equity, until there's a commercial or financial upside to the benefits of diversity, it's going to be hard to gain traction. Now, I think there's been some really interesting reports over some time on this, particularly McKinsey, who've done a number of reports, and actually we cited one of them in the research, Diversity Wins. But I think it's a really interesting part and an interesting angle, especially as a business owner. But I think, Jane, what's your thoughts on this? Because I know you have some experience. I'd love to hear them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of studies, as you say, that suggest that diverse boards and diverse executive teams are associated with superior profitability. And indeed, there's another study by the Boston Consulting Group that looks at innovation and found that companies that had diverse management teams, a higher proportion of their revenues came from innovative products they'd only just sort of developed, than organizations that had less diverse boards. So there's a link with creativity and innovation as well. But those studies don't always relate to the investment or private equity worlds. There's limited data on showing that diverse investment teams lead to superior performance, and that's largely because there aren't diverse teams. Most portfolio managers, most investors are men. But there's a recent study that Willis Towers Watson did, my old firm, and they looked at the impact of diverse teams on investment performance. And it's not been published yet, I don't think, but they found that there was a 0.6% uplift in performance from diverse teams relative to homogenous teams. And that doesn't sound like very much, but in the investment industry, 60 basis points, 0.6% per year compounded is an enormous deal, and probably a more significant number than certainly the researchers were expecting, or from any other effect. So I think there is a growing business case, even for our industry, to have more diversity in our teams.
Yeah, agreed. And I think in terms of the report, the McKinsey report, the Diversity Wins, which Katie has shared, I think a couple of key stats that I'm just going to read out. So in terms of gender diversity, companies in the top quartile were 25% more likely to have above average profitability, which I think is extremely significant. And in terms of ethnic and cultural diversity, companies in the top quartile outperformed those in the bottom quartile by 36% in terms of profitability. So I think there's a real genuine case for this. And for me, it's kind of D&I has moved from something that's you should be doing or a nice to have to being a key strategic business lever, in my opinion. Jazz, what's your thoughts on this?
So I probably am maybe a bit more simplistic with my view. I completely agree that diverse teams do increase profitability, but I kind of just feel that it's the right thing to do. And I think sometimes actually we probably overcomplicate diversity and inclusion by looking at, what's going to be the return, what's the commerciality of that. And I think there is a good argument for going down that route. But I also think this is a fundamental kind of human right to have equality and inclusiveness and a openness of a company, and it shouldn't need to be linked to what do we get back in return. So I think these studies are brilliant in the fact that hopefully for those where there is maybe a blocker in terms of resistance to change, maybe these kind of studies do help. But I also think that fundamentally the culture of a business should be thinking about this. We should just be doing it. There should be no question that we shouldn't have to overthink this. So maybe I'm a bit simplistic on that, but that's kind of my view.
No, not at all. I think, it's really important. And I think, there are so many other benefits than just financial. But I think it's almost like if you're benefiting at a number of different levels, you have a more inclusive team, you have better problem solving, et cetera, then the output of that hopefully is better financial performance. It's not kind of rocket science, is it? You put good inputs in, great inputs out. So great. I think that's a really interesting place to start, I think. And I guess the next part of where I'd like to go is, and based on the report, is cognitive diversity. So diversity of thought, and this is definitely a sort of a game changer for me, and it sort of shifted my paradigm massively to the benefits of diversity. And it was really kicked off by a book by Matthew Said called Rebel Ideas, which is an unbelievable book that I would highly recommend. I recommend it to Greg at Christmas. I think it was his Christmas present. He hasn't read it yet in full, but it's absolutely brilliant. It completely changed my paradigm on cognitive diversity and the power of it. Again, Jane, I'd like just to come to you on this, because I know, again, you've done lots of research on this and you've been part of cognitive diversity. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I suppose I sort of see cognitive diversity as different ways that people process information and make decisions. And that can come from just their sort of personality type and their preferences for the way that just the way their brains work. But it also will come from the different experiences that they've had, maybe the different subjects they studied at university, or if they didn't go to university. It can come from the networks that they have, so they can tap into different people and so on. So it's not just about sort of the wiring that you're born with, but also all of the experiences that you have. So it's likely that there is an overlap with the demographic diversity that perhaps we tend to focus on as organisations. So gender, ethnicity, etc. But you can't always assume that. I mean, I was talking to the head of research at a mainstream asset management company not so long ago, and he said that he just hired physicists into his team. And physicists have got great skills. They're analytical. They can probably build fantastic financial models and all that sort of thing. But I don't think a whole team of physicists is likely to lead to good investment decision making, because there's so much more to markets and companies than just building a sort of a fantastic model. So hiring a female physicist to join a team of male physicists is probably not going to add a lot. So you can't always assume that just sort of going for demographic diversity will automatically lead to cognitive diversity. We need to dig a bit deeper, I think. Yeah,
100%. And I think without ruining the book or giving any spoilers away, there's a really good example in the book, and I'm gonna read it because I want to get it right. And it's about 9/11. And this just really emphasizes the power of cognitive diversity to me. So around the 2000s, the early 2000s, the majority of the CIA were, I quote, white, male, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant American elites. And so I think what the CIA believed was that those guys were the people who were most likely to protect America's values. And so what Matthew Said says in his book is that by having people who think similarly and in a similar way and are from a similar background, there's more likely to be what he terms echo chambers. So you're just hearing, we hear a lot about echo chambers at the moment in terms of social media and all that sort of stuff, but you create your own echo chamber where complex problems are not able to be critically challenged, which I think is really important. And as the world develops, these problems are getting more and more difficult. So in the 9/11 example, the CIA couldn't, and I quote, couldn't believe that this tall Saudi with a beard squatting around a campfire could be a threat to the United States of America. And how can a man in a cave out-communicate the world's leading communication society? So I think basically by not understanding certain Islamic cultures well enough, there was a massive blind spot to the influence that bin Laden was having within certain groups, and sadly the rest is history. So I think it's obviously a very extreme example, but it demonstrates that without diversity and diversity of thought, we can leave ourselves exposed to massive blind spots in our team and not even know it. So I think that's a hugely powerful part of cognitive diversity. Jazz, what for you, Rebel Ideas, obviously we all read it as a team. What sort of impact did it have on you?
Well, the first, I mean, huge. I mean, the first thing that I do have to kind of caveat is that I had to Google what cognitive diversity was, because, as I said, I'm from a working class background, and we don't really talk like that. So that was the first thing that I had to really get my head around what we were actually reading. But once I got into it, I think the main thing for me from the book was about when you're kind of the cloning element of when you hire people that are like you, which really kind of resonated with me massively, because actually going back to my own childhood of being at a school where actually no one looked like me. I was the only person of color at school, and not necessarily always having a huge group of friends, because friends naturally gravitate to people who look like them, who sound like them. And I found that actually what we were doing at Job Search, without even realizing, is we were hiring people that we're all quite similar at Job Search. There's a really lovely, we have a great team, but we're all people that want to hang out with each other, that's not a bad thing at all. But I think what I liked about the book is actually that's great, but we probably do also need to look at having people that do have more diverse backgrounds in the way they think, because otherwise we're just hiring clones, which will mean that we're not going to be innovative, we're not going to see new opportunities. So for me, it was quite yeah, it took me a while. I'm not the best for textbook, so for me it was the first one I read that actually kind of blew my mind a little bit. So yeah, that I really enjoyed it.
Great. And Greg, if you what's your experience of cognitive diversity? How aware of you in your line of work with this?
Yeah, I mean, at Green and Green, I mean, we are very aware of it, and actually of the four, I think right in saying, yeah, the last 4 partners, 3 have been women, and that's a real conscious decision actually. And working with clients, there are lots of publicly listed clients, actually they are required as part of their corporate governance to report on certain things like gender diversity, ethnic diversity initiatives that they're taking. And I think we're going to see more and more of that in terms of ethnic pay gaps, perhaps disability pay gaps, all these sorts of things. And I do see that clients that are embracing this, particularly at a top level, I think it has to come down to, you've got to have a board that's diverse, will be more creative. And when we have issues, so at the moment, flexible working is a big thing for clients. We've all been forced into flexible working, but offices are about to reopen and businesses are asking themselves, okay, well, how do we get people back into the office? How do we go back to how we were working? But those businesses with more diverse makeup are saying to themselves, well, actually, what are the benefits of what we've been through, and how can we harness that? How can we encourage it? Actually, is it going to be easier for women to move forward to the higher ranking positions if we embrace flexibility? Blow your mind. Could there be a director that works part-time, potentially flexibly from home? So I'm certainly seeing firsthand that those boards with a more diverse makeup are coming up with the more innovative decisions, and I think they are going to attract and retain the best talent going forward.
Great, yeah, totally agree. Cool. In terms of moving on to kind of our sector, obviously that was a huge part of the report, and I think really encouragingly, and I think the survey at the start backs this up, is that 70% of the companies we surveyed have a D&I policy, but are private equity firms really seeing the sort of, I guess, the 360-degree benefits of D&I? What do you think, Jane?
I think the private equity world's gone a long way to go. And I admire a lot of the initiatives. I mean, Level 20, I think, is doing a fantastic job. But to date, it's been more about fixing the women than it has been on fixing the organizational culture, if you like, that enables women and other groups to really thrive. I had a conversation with a young woman about 3 years ago. She'd been working in a deal team at a mid-sized private equity firm for a number of years, and then she left and didn't leave, but she took maternity leave. And when she came back, she asked if she could adjust her hours a little bit in order to be able to drop her child off at nursery. And she was told no. She was told that she could not stay in a deal team unless she was prepared to work whatever hours were required when it was required. There was no flexibility there at all. And basically she was told, go off and, you know, go and work in the portfolio management team, because we can allow some flexibility there. And so, you know, I think unless we break the gap, the gap between what companies are saying and the actual experience of people on the ground day to day, unless we can close that gap, we're really not going to shift the cultures of the organizations and make this a truly inclusive industry.
I think that's such a good point, Jane. And I see that with a lot of clients, actually. And like I said, I act for individuals and for companies. And my wife is in financial services, so she works. So I can see in the chat that someone's put that fathers of daughters are more likely to recruit women. You know, I have a couple of daughters. My wife's in financial services. She has seen firsthand discrimination when she's gone off and had children, and it makes my blood boil in that sense. But then objectively, there are going to be some roles where it doesn't work for, but it's just being open as part of that debate. And there's often a big difference between what a company says, so what it has in its policies and procedures, and what it does in practice and its culture, and those sort of microaggressions that are allowed to be sort of promoted through an organization. And I won't talk about any clients for confidentiality reasons, obviously, but for anyone who's listening, there's a case of LA UK Limited in Gelham, and I'll put it in the link shortly. But that is a really good example of where an employment judge basically tore a company to pieces. They had equality and diversity policies, they'd even done training, but then a male joined the team, Indian background, people in the team saying to him, so where are you from? And he'd say, you know, Croydon. No, where are you really from? And things like, I guess you drive a Mercedes, don't you? You all drive Mercedes. And things like, oh, have you ever thought about opening a corner shop? And all this, it just blew his mind. And there were managers that were overhearing these comments and didn't do anything. So when it went to the employment tribunal, the company tried to argue, well, hang on a moment, not our fault. We're going to rely on the statutory defence under the Equality Act. We did all that we reasonably could to stop it. It's a rogue employee. We're not vicariously liable. Tribunal said, well, that's not the case. You've got the policies and procedures and you've done bits of training every now and again, but it's not reflective of your culture and what actually happens. And I think what the law now is requiring is people to be effectively anti-racist. You've got to stand up for these things within your organization. So if there is a woman who is asking to go part-time and you within your business think actually maybe the role should be or could be accommodated, you need to stand up for that and say something. But it's creating an environment where people can, and that all comes back to education. People within the business need to understand what it's like to have that disadvantage, to not be at the starting line at the beginning of a race.
I also think just on that, I think especially with women and taking that time out to go on maternity, it really does gall me a little bit that you as a woman professional, you've worked so hard to get to a certain level of your career, and then you have a family, which is absolutely okay, and then to come back and have to be told that this role doesn't accommodate for you to have a family. So what happens then? I think that's the bit for me that I think private equity needs to really start looking at, because I don't think it's acceptable anymore to just simply say, well, the role doesn't quite work for that. Why can't it work for that? And how can we try and make it work? Because otherwise that will always mean that men will always be able to have a stronger career path and be able to move forward, whereas women will always have to make a choice between, do I carry on my career or do I just have to give up and have children? And I don't think they should have to have that choice. It should be a case of what can we actually do? And I think until private equity and other investment firms get comfortable with kind of just challenging themselves on, is this job, does it need to be 24/7? You know, most women that I know that have children are more efficient at working and cramming the hours in than those that don't. I mean, look at Savannah, our founder. I mean, she literally didn't even have maternity leave and came in and was breastfeeding, holding meetings, you know, completely taking control of a whole business, and is efficient and still an amazing mum. And I just think that's something that I just think it's not good enough anymore to just say that the role doesn't work for you. Sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, with going back to my example, she ended up leaving and joining another firm, which was such a loss to the organization. So yeah, you've got somebody really good, you've trained them up, they're very successful, and then they just leave and go somewhere that is more accommodating, more supportive. What a waste.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think COVID surely has taken away some of these excuses. You know, majority of clients that I speak to in our sector are having, you know, have had a good time during COVID financially. They've done some great deals, and that's great. But they've had the majority of their teams working from home. So I think, you know, hopefully this is the real positive out of COVID, that people can work effectively remotely around a different schedule than the traditional 8 till whatever. So I think, and I totally agree with, you know, mums are the most efficient people I know, for sure. So I definitely agree with that. We actually had a question come in beforehand, and I think we've kind of touched on it, but let's just make sure we have. So how do you change the mindset of people who do not have families to understand that there is more to life than work? So I think this is around mums. Is it just that cultural thing, or is it something else?
I think it works both ways as well, though, doesn't it? Because, you know, as a man, I've got 3 young children. And for me, family is really important as well. So it's creating those opportunities across the board. And I think that links into the question that's been asked as well, Ben, in terms of how can you upwardly influence the thinking of management who are all white males and think they're doing enough with sort of off-the-shelf D&I. So how do you influence upwards? I mean, Jane, you've probably seen some really good examples of where that has and hasn't happened.
I think a few ideas there. One is shadow boards. That can be a really useful idea. So the idea is you have a board of maybe younger people in the organization, probably a diverse group, and they see all the papers that the top board do, and they opine on it. And so the senior management get the opinions of a different range of inputs. That's one idea. Reverse mentoring is really powerful. So the idea here is that, you know, your senior white male leader is paired with somebody else in the organization who has a different background. And by building that personal relationship and hearing what the experience is of that person, you start to break down the barriers and create a bit more empathy about that person. So I think there is some really good practice, how to bridge the gap between the leaders who can become quite detached from what's going on in the rest of the organization. And reverse mentoring, I think, is sort of underutilized really across the board.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, shadow boards is a really interesting one that comes up in Rebel Ideas as well.
Yeah,
it's something we've done as a business, but we haven't done it for a little while. And actually, the outputs of those shadow boards were really interesting because, you know, it's a completely different it's a completely different mindset, you know, with a generational thing in many ways. So yeah, super useful. Greg, did you have anything to add? I think you were going to say something.
I think in terms of changing people's mindsets, looking upward, it's really difficult, really difficult. So quite often where I'm coming in and doing training and looking at strategies of where clients have actually faced tribunal claims, there's nothing like 10 days in an employment tribunal being scrutinized over your approach to equality and diversity to really focus your mind on what you're not doing properly. I think that's often a sad reality. So sometimes it's just a case of having to be burnt. I think other initiatives like gender pay reporting and ethnicity pay reporting, I think will have some impact in terms of people opening people's eyes to it. But I think it's got to come a bit further. It's where you've got institutional investors, for example, saying we want to see your diversity strategy and we want to see that that's your culture and the way that you're working. I think that's when senior management are really going to focus their mind on it. And creating personal experiences. You know, my wife works, we have young children. So when I'm looking at management issues, I come at it a completely different mindset to perhaps a generation before, where it would have been the same white male, but his wife wouldn't have worked. And there wouldn't have been the same opportunities or expectations for his daughters to go off and have those careers or have the opportunities.
And just to add to Greg's point about sort of institutional investors, I am seeing more and more institutional investors asking more questions around diversity and inclusion of their asset managers and their consultants, and they're getting more demanding. And in the mainstream asset management world, there's also the regulator, the FCA, who are asking a lot more questions about culture. So there's lots of external pressures on leaders to be taking this topic more seriously, definitely.
And sorry to just jump in on there as well. So I think from the recruitment angle as well, the more and more candidates that we speak to are actually asking those questions about, is it a diverse workplace? And sometimes it's hard to answer because obviously we're all kind of at this journey together at the moment in the early stages. And so probably no, at the moment it's not, but this company is trying. But the power of the actual candidate themselves to walk away from an organization that they don't feel represents them or is going to represent them is also a really key external push as well. You're gonna lose great talent if you can't demonstrate that there is opportunity and access for everyone.
100%. I think even in our research, 92% of candidates said that an inclusive environment is either important or very important. So the chances are, the next hire, this will be seriously high on their agenda. So I think that's a really good point. Great. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll move the conversation on. I think it's sort of probably building on a few of these topics, but what are other challenges with encouraging a more diverse workforce? So in the report, we had your kind of understanding D&I as a concept, team attitudes and kind of time commitment were three sort of headlines that came up. I think interestingly, having the budgets to do this isn't an issue from the research we've done, which is encouraging and exciting that there is money to be spent and to be invested in D&I, but it's not necessarily coming through. Greg, I just want to pick up on a couple of bits that you mentioned and just build on those. What sort of other challenges have you witnessed in terms of perhaps fear of change, harassment, perhaps that type of stuff from a more legal angle?
Yes, I think a lot of barriers to change, really, and actually a lot of the barriers to effective people management is a fear of legal implications. And I often see my role, particularly when I'm doing training, about dispelling myths. Employment law isn't actually that complicated. Don't tell everyone because I'll be out of a job. It's all about acting reasonably. And as long as you come at it with that mindset, you'll be absolutely fine. And discrimination legislation, if you think about harassment, it's all about having the effect of creating this intimidating or hostile environment for people. And why would you ever want to have an environment like that within your workplace? People aren't going to be able to bring their best possible selves if they're feeling that actually they're being humiliated or degraded, etc. But the concern is you're going to be the person that calls these people out. It's just conflict, and people don't like conflict, quite understandably. But if you're in that position. So I've had very, very sad cases over the years where individuals have said to me that they've been very close to committing suicide because of how they've been made to feel at work. From on the face of it, things that wouldn't seem significant. People commenting on their hair or commenting that they might be aggressive. All things that are associated perhaps with race or whatever it might be. So I think there's a fear of, if you embrace diversity and inclusion, you're going to be inviting problems. You could be inviting conflict. You could be the ones that are in employment tribunals. But I think if you've got a supportive environment, you will avoid that. Claims aren't inevitable. I think that as we see pressure build, and we see campaigns like Me Too and Black Lives Matter, there will be a period of conflict. It's like where I talk to managers when we do a lot of high performance training. How do you get most out of teams? You probably will get some grievances because people are going to be unsettled, and you might get some more claims because you've got rid of your poor performers. But you have to go through that pain to get to the point where you're going to improve. Agreed.
Jazz, what about you? What's your thoughts?
So I think a lot of the clients that I speak to, their main challenge really with getting a diverse workforce is where to start. because I think when you talk about diversity and inclusion, as we found, Ben, when we looked at it internally, it's so big, it covers everything, and it can become ridiculously overwhelming that you almost think, oh, let's not do that. And I think the main thing is trying to work out from a culture point of view, what do you actually want to achieve? What do you want to get out of it? And if it is just as simple as making your company accessible for everyone, then you almost want to take it into bite-sized chunks and not try and change the world overnight. And I think that's where I worry sometimes with, obviously with the riots and the big campaigns and the big protests, they definitely need to happen, but it also puts a lot of pressure on companies to suddenly change tomorrow, and therefore you rush it and it becomes a box ticking exercise. And I think one of our clients is, that I won't mention, but one of our clients has really kind of nailed this spot with, they've just kind of focused on one core area, and that's social mobility, for example. So they've recognized that when they look at their whole business, they think the way that they can help tackle diversity and inclusion is by looking at social mobility and allowing the way that they hire for their investment professionals not to just come cherry pick from those key universities that are typical for getting into the pipeline of private equity. So they run an internship scheme during the summer where they specifically target very bright students, A-level students, that come from disadvantaged backgrounds, that are just on the cusp of deciding whether they can afford to go to university, whether they are going to university, and they bring them in to show them what private equity is actually all about, because that is their way, and they actually track their way them throughout the whole of the summer, the 2-week period, and then after they graduate as well, they will work with them to provide recommendations and letters of referral to help kind of uplift and bring people up with them. And that's just one area, so they don't try and tackle all of D&I at one time. And I think that's the main challenge I hear, is like where to start. And I think it's just identifying what feels natural and authentic for your business.
Agreed. Definitely. Jane, what about you? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think we've touched on quite a few things. I think the lack of buy-in from the top is often the missing piece, because they set the tone. And actually, I think if they're seeing inclusion and diversity as a sort of add-on to their normal business as usual, then that's not likely to work. It needs to be sort of part of their business strategy. I quite agree with Jazz that they don't need to boil the ocean. They don't need to get everything right. And having some focus really makes a difference. So just do something. And I think your whole organization will benefit from that and feel proud of the kind of initiatives that are going on. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think the other challenge is, and I think Greg mentioned this, is about sort of the role of the people manager. And in the investment industry, line managers, people managers, they're often picked because they're really good at their technical job, not because they've got the aptitude to really look after people and support them. They're not given a lot of training. They're not given targets related to how well they're doing as a people manager. They're probably still rewarded on the basis of the performance of their deals or the performance of the funds that they run. So it's not surprising that the people managers are struggling. So I think that's another area I think organizations could really focus on, is equipping their line managers to be really inclusive managers. And I think that'd be an area that all organizations could take a look at.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks for that, guys. I think this, in summary, there isn't a silver bullet. It sounds like leadership is key, and commitment from leadership is key, but there's no silver bullet. It's multifaceted to get this right.
Yeah, I think it's starting the conversation. It's allowing people to be heard within your organisation, but then also understanding them. There's one thing to be heard, but then to understand. Ben, what I see is a lot of clients who say, right, we want to start with these initiatives. We want some metrics. We want some data. Where are we at the moment? What's our ethnic? Where are our pay gaps? Who has disabilities? What are people's sexual orientations, backgrounds? All those sorts of things. So just a word of caution, though, if you are thinking of going out and gathering that sort of data, just do be mindful of the data protection rules, GDPR. both on whether you've got legitimate reasons to hold and process that data, how it's secured, and you should probably be doing a data impact assessment. So for those on the call, it's probably not something you do yourself. You'll be involving your data protection officer. So just make sure you do link in with your different stakeholders, whether it be marketing, your DPOs, or your lawyers.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I think organisations who've done that kind of work, got comfortable with the kind of legal position, they may still find that individuals in their organisations aren't prepared to share that information with them. So it's got to be really well explained to the people taking part in those sorts of surveys. What is this information for? How is it going to be used? And I think over time you can build that kind of trust, and you'll find the participation rates are rising, but you're probably not going to get there overnight.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes total sense. I mean, if we're saying there's no silver bullet, but leadership commitment is key, a question that came in before the webinar was, we talked about how do you begin, but what if leadership don't want to listen?
I would go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think if they're not getting it in this current environment, given what we've all gone through in the last year, then they're not leaders I would want to be associated with.
That's fair. Jane, what's your? Oh, go on, Jazz.
No, sorry, I was going to. I thought I could have countered that, but actually, Jane just summarised that perfectly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly. That goes back to the culture and the brand, and do you want to be part of that? And I guess the cultures don't lie, right? You can have a shiny policies, you can have mission statements, you can have a lovely looking website, but if the culture's not there and the values aren't adhered to and respected and valued, then it trickles down in all aspects of the business. So I think that's really that's a really good comment, straight to the point, Jane. One thing that has come up and does come up quite a lot is, in order to help promote a more diverse team and to recruit a more diverse team, there's a lot of conversation that goes on about unconscious bias training, and I think there's an element of that it's it's not necessarily what it's cracked up to be, perhaps. Jane, I know you've got quite a good, strong view on this. What do you think about unconscious bias training?
Well, I've sort of been through unconscious bias training, and I really enjoyed it. And then I just saw the people on the course all go, "Oh, that was interesting," and then go back to their desks and just carry on as they did before. It didn't lead to any change. So I think there's a danger that unconscious bias training is either it's a bit of a tick box exercise. Oh, I've done that, so everything's okay. Or it can almost become an excuse for, well, I am biased. It's the way I'm made. I can't help it. It's almost an excuse for not changing the way you do things. So I think there are 2 or 3 things you can do instead, or as well. One is, and we've talked about Rebel Ideas, but this is another book that I really recommend. It's Iris Bonnet's What Works. And although she's focused on gender equality, I think it applies to all dimensions of diversity. And she basically says, yes, we are biased. So try to avoid bias by designing into all of your systems ways of overcoming that or reducing its impact. And the book is full of wonderful ideas. And in fact, the Government Equalities Office has produced guidance for organisations very much building on this work, tips for how to build sort of anti-bias into all of your processes and systems, whether it's recruitment or promotions processes or assigning people to jobs or work or whatever. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is storytelling. I think one of the most powerful things that that we've done with the Diversity Project is we've heard from people talking about their experiences. We had a wonderful talk by Maika Bliebenich, who's now at AllianceBernstein. She has ADHD, and she was talking about her experiences of being a neurodiverse person working in an organization that was really trying to help but didn't really get it. And we have, other people like Gavin Lewis, who's now at BlackRock, talking about his experience of being a Black investment professional and going to industry events and being asked, for a top up of champagne because it was assumed that as a Black man, he was the waiter. And it's by hearing these stories, people's real life experience, you start to get it. You start to realize, actually, this is real, and what can I do to help avoid that ever happening again? And people want to kind of get involved personally. So I think a combination of designing stuff into your processes and sharing stories are two powerful alternatives, if you like, to the sort of unconscious bias training.
Yeah, I agree. And it goes back to that silver bullet thing. It's not going to be one, just by doing a couple of hours training is not going to necessarily solve anything if people leave and, revert to type effectively. Just conscious of time, I know we've only got a few more minutes left. Obviously, we're not diversity experts at Just Search at all, but we like to think we are experts in hiring. And so, I think one of the really key parts of the report was kind of understanding how recruitment agencies can support with our clients' D&I objectives. And I know, Jazz, you're doing this day in, day out, speaking with clients and doing the hiring. So I'd be really interested to kind of get your view on this and how agencies should be able to support our clients with this.
So I think that the first thing is all of the clients I speak to, they're all willing and wanting to look at this area, which is the first step. So that's already a good thing. I think the one thing that we need to work on together in partnership is, instead of clients coming to us saying, okay, we're now really focused on diversity and inclusion, so therefore I want a diverse shortlist. That's fine, but I think what we actually need to start doing as in partnership is working out, what does diversity mean to your company? And that's what I was saying before. It's too big to just say a diverse shortlist, because the implication is we would always put forward people that come from different backgrounds, but we need to understand what you actually mean by that, what you're looking to achieve, how can we actually help you? And then what we as recruiters need to start looking at is, where do we find these candidates? Because I think there are obviously certain job boards, and as we work in we recruit for secretarial staff, there are going to be certain job boards, but the onus would be on us as a recruiter to start thinking outside of that. Because, as I say, I grew up in Portsmouth, Pompey, to anyone that actually knows it. You probably wouldn't go to where I came from. But for example, growing up, came from a very rough area. I didn't even really know where Mayfair was in London. I kind of heard about the Ritz and I thought that was the Queen. So the fact that I now work in in a recruitment for private equity is quite odd for my friends back home who have no idea. So I think it's a case of, how do we attract that kind of area of pool of candidates for you that are actually, like, not saying that I'm the best candidate in the world, but I'm proof that actually just having those kind of backgrounds can mean you can make it into a industry that does seem a little bit intimidating, to be honest. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is moving away from that the type and fit. I think when you get to interview stage, which is really hard, and it's something that we're at Job Search looking at as well, because it's so easy to hire based on the right fit. But when you say the right fit, you automatically close yourself down and have this cloning aspect of when you do your recruitment process, because you don't necessarily want to keep hiring the same type of person or personality. You do need people that can change it up, and that's linked to what we were saying about the rebel ideas. And then probably lastly, my main thing is around putting in unnecessary blockers to hiring. So making candidates tick every single box and being perfect on paper. And the one thing that always stands out for me is asking for a university degree. Now, obviously, there are certain roles where you need a university degree, but if we keep it simple to what we actually recruit for, of executive assistants and operational support staff, there isn't the requirement to have a degree to be able to do your job, but you can choose a great candidate that has amazing skills and experience in the role. And I think, again, if you're trying to create more diversity just by focusing on those that have a degree, you're automatically ruling out a huge number of people that either can't afford to go to university or maybe just aren't sure what they want to study, so they aren't going, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not good enough to do the job. So I think those are kind of I'm just conscious of the time, those three are the main things that I would say that we need to kind of talk to, but it's all about working in partnership, I think, with your recruiter.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Cool. That's really interesting, Jazz. Thank you for that. Just conscious of, we've got the last couple of minutes and we've got a couple of questions. We've got the first one, which is, would be interesting to hear what people think about the Scandinavian model of allowing similar paternity leave to maternity leave. I think, Greg, that's one for you.
Yes, I mean, the government introduced the concept of shared parental leave, the idea that after 2 weeks, the mother could share the remaining 50 weeks of their leave with their partner. And that, I'd say, hasn't been taken up by many clients at all. I mean, every now and again, I'll get a phone call from clients saying, we know we've got this shared parental policy, but how does it actually work? What does it mean? And the reality is people aren't going to take it up because there's not the pay to support it. Is often the case, and we had some litigation recently to say whether or not shared parental leave should match maternity pay if it's enhanced, and the judgment in that was no, maternity pay is different. So I think the Scandinavian model is brilliant, and I think it does encourage greater equality.
Just to add to that, there are some larger investment firms that have equalised paternity and maternity pay arrangements. And they're starting to see people taking it up. So money talks, but also the culture is encouraging, and there's role play. The leaders are role modeling it and showing that it can be done. So there are some good examples out there.
100%. Just on to the last question from Alex: Are there really any jobs that can't be more flexible? Expecting people to be available 24/7 is much more about the way you run your team. And I think we've kind of touched on that. I mean, my personal view is, I think all jobs can be flexible. Guys, do you have a view on this one?
I think in the private equity domain, more often than not, Ben, you're probably right. I act for a number of other clients, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, etc., where there absolutely are roles that can't be done flexibly. But in the private equity domain, most, I think, can. It's mindset that needs to change.
Yes. Yeah.
Job shares, etc. There's no team-based processes. There's no reason why you couldn't have people working different hours and different locations.
Great. I think that's a good one to finish on, and we can wrap up. So massive thanks, guys. Thanks to the panel. Katie will put everyone's LinkedIn handles on the chat, so if anyone wants to contact any of the guys, then please do. We've had one final question that's come in, but what we'll do is we'll answer that one, Karen, and directly. So yeah, before we leave, I just want to do a really quick exit poll, because one of the reasons we came up with this, diversity and inclusion as our kind of sort of research topic was some of the feedback we had with clients from our last Lunch and Learn webinar, which is on salary surveys. So we're just going to do a very quick exit poll just to understand what people want to hear more about and what you want us to research next. So just very quickly, what topic would you like our next research report / webinar to be on? So flexible working / return to the office, the future of the EA role, staff morale and engagement, more on D&I, other, and you can get in touch with us after the webinar. So we'll just give that another 10 more seconds. And then Katie, if you want to give us the results. Cool. Okay, cool. So flexible working and return to the office. I think we did some lunch and learns on this sort of middle of last year. So I definitely think we can revisit that. We've actually got some quite good research already on some of that. And yeah, so that makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks to the panelists. We will be sharing the key takeaways and the video recording with everyone. Probably by the end of Monday, if not early Tuesday. But thanks very much. I really enjoyed that, guys. And we'll see you all again soon.
See you later.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.